John introduced Kemi to alcohol, convincing her it would help her feel better. One evening, after a few drinks, Kemi confessed, "I want you, Uncle." They stumbled into the bedroom. Days passed. For years later, after facing many challenges in their previous home, Mama Kemi decided to start afresh by relocating to Lagos. The city was noisy, full of life, and promised opportunities, but it was also filled with hidden dangers. Mama Kemi had only one goal: to keep her daughter safe and provide her with a better future. Kemi, a quiet and curious girl of 16, loved exploring and making friends, but her mother was strict. She believed the world outside was dangerous, and her daughter was too young to handle it. As they settled into their small but tidy home in Lagos, Mama Kemi laid down her rules. "Kemi, listen to me," she said, her tone firm. "No going out unless I tell you. No friends in this house, and you don't need a phone. If you need anything, you ask me." "Yes, Mama," Kemi replied, though her heart sank. She missed the freedom she had in their old town, but she dared not disobey. Life in Lagos was tough, but Mama Kemi was determined. She worked 2 jobs. One day, a golden opportunity came her way. A large distribution company offered her a position as a manager. It was her chance to earn more money and secure a brighter future for Kemi. However, the job required frequent travel, and that worried her. Who would look after Kemi while she was away? She paced a small living room, her mind racing. Then she had an idea. Her younger brother, John, could help. John was a kind but lively man in his late 20s. He had a way with people and could be trusted, or so she thought. She called him immediately, and within days, he arrived in Lagos, ready to help. When John walked through the door, Kemi was excited. She had always liked her Uncle John, who told funny stories and played games with her during visits. For the first week, everything was perfect. John helped Kemi with her homework and even taught her how to cook some simple meals. In the evenings, they laughed over silly jokes, and Kemi began to feel like she had a friend again. But there was one thing Kemi didn't know about John. He had a secret addiction to adult movies. Though he tried to hide it, the temptation grew stronger every day. At first, he only watched when Kemi was asleep or at school, but the more he indulged, the harder it became to resist. Meanwhile, Mama Kemi was adjusting to her new job. She called every evening to check on Kemi and reminded John to keep her safe. "Don't let her out of your sight, John," she warned. "Don't worry, sister. I'll take care of her like she's my own daughter," John promised. But his words had a growing inner conflict. Kemi, on the other hand, began to notice changes. John seemed distracted at times and spent long hours locked in his room. She didn't understand why, but she trusted him, even when things felt a little different. One evening, Kemi asked, "Uncle John, why don't you play with me like before?" "I'm just tired, Kemi," he replied, forcing a smile. "Maybe tomorrow." Kemi nodded, but deep down, she felt lonely. She missed her mother and longed for the warmth of their old life. Little did she know, the days ahead would test her in ways she could never imagine. The days turned into weeks, and Mama Kemi became busier with her job. Her calls to Kemi were brief, often interrupted by work meetings or long trips. "Are you behaving well, Kemi?" she would ask. "Yes, Mama," Kemi would reply, keeping her voice steady, even though she felt a growing emptiness. John continued to help her with her assignments and chores, but something had changed. He spent more and more time in his room, and whenever Kemi passed by, she could hear the faint sound of videos playing. Though she didn't fully understand what was going on, she felt something was wrong. One day, Kemi woke up with a sharp pain in her stomach. She ignored it at first, thinking it was something she ate, but the pain grew worse. By the 3rd day, she noticed blood staining her clothes. Panicked, She ran to John's room and knocked frantically. "Uncle John! Uncle John!" John opened the door, startled. He quickly hid his phone under a pillow and stepped out. "What's wrong, Kemi?" With tears in her eyes, Kemi pointed to her stained dress and whispered, "I'm bleeding." John's heart raced, not because of the blood, but because he had been caught off guard. He quickly pieced together what was happening. "It's your menstruation," he explained. "It's normal for girls your age." He gave her a brief explanation about periods and showed her how to use sanitary pads. Kemi felt awkward and confused, but thanked him for his help. From that day, a small seed of trust grew between them. John felt a sense of responsibility toward her, but his inner demons were growing stronger. John's addiction to adult movies worsened. He started staying up late at night, glued to his phone, and his thoughts became darker. He tried to resist his urges, especially when Kemi was around, but it became harder with each passing day. One evening, after a night out with friends, John returned home slightly tipsy. He stumbled into the living room and saw Kemi lying on the couch in her favorite nightgown. The soft glow of the television illuminated her innocent face, and something inside him snapped. Without thinking, he leaned over her. Kemi woke up, startled and confused, as John pinned her down. "Uncle John, stop!" she screamed, but her cries were muffled by his hand. When it was over, John sat on the floor, trembling. "I'm sorry, Kemi," he whispered. "Please, don't tell your mother. She'll never forgive me." Kemi curled up in a corner, sobbing. She didn't know what to do or whom to trust. Her mother had always been strict, and Kemi feared she would blame her for what had happened. The next day, Kemi avoided John as much as she could. The house, once filled with laughter, became heavy with silence. John tried to act normal, but guilt consumed him. One evening, he came home from the club and found Kemi lying on the couch again, wearing a different nightgown. The sight of her triggered his urges once more. He tried to resist, but the alcohol clouded his judgment. This time, when it was over, Kemi didn't cry. She looked at John with empty eyes and said, "Don't worry, Uncle. I enjoyed it." John was shocked and confused. Kemi's words haunted him, but they also fueled his addiction. What started as a one-time mistake became a dangerous pattern. Over time, John introduced Kemi to alcohol, convincing her it would help her feel better. One evening, after a few drinks, Kemi confessed, "I want you, Uncle." They stumbled into the bedroom. Days passed, and Kemi began to notice strange changes in her body. She felt tired more often, her appetite wavered, and her stomach began to feel tender. At first, she thought it was stress from everything that had happened. But when the changes became undeniable, she realized the truth. She was pregnant. The discovery left her frozen with fear. She couldn't tell her mother. Mama Kemi's strict rules and harsh words loomed in her mind. "She won't believe me," Kemi whispered to herself. "She'll think it's my fault." But hiding it felt impossible. What could she do? Late one evening, after much hesitation, Kemi went to Uncle John's room. He looked up, startled to see her there. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Uncle John, I need to tell you something." His heart sank. "What is it, Kemi?" he asked cautiously. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I think I'm pregnant." Uncle John's face turned pale. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing the room. "This can't be happening," he muttered. "If your mother finds out..." His voice trailed off, leaving the terrible consequences unspoken. He turned to Kemi, his expression filled with a desperate mix of guilt and fear. "We have to take care of this. No one can know," he said firmly. Kemi felt her stomach churn, but she nodded. She didn't see another option. The next day, Uncle John contacted a friend who worked as a nurse. He told her a story, claiming the pregnancy was only a few weeks old and asking for advice on terminating it. The nurse, unaware of the full truth, recommended some medications. Uncle John purchased them and gave them to Kemi, urging her to take them. "This will fix everything," he said, though his voice wavered with doubt. Kemi looked at the pills in her hand. Her instincts screamed at her to stop, to tell her mother, to run away. But fear kept her rooted. She swallowed the pills, hoping it would all be over soon. That night, the pain began. It was sharp and unbearable, radiating through her entire body. Kemi curled up on her bed, tears streaming down her face. She felt weak, and when she tried to stand, her legs gave way beneath her. By morning, the bleeding had started. Uncle John found her in a fragile state, barely able to move. Panic took over. He rushed her to the nearest hospital, calling Mama Kemi along the way. "Kemi's in the hospital," he said, his voice trembling. She's not well." Mama Kemi's heart stopped. "What happened?" she demanded. I'll explain everything when you get here," he stammered. When Mama Kemi arrived at the hospital, she found her daughter pale and unconscious on a hospital bed. The doctor's words hit her like a thunderstorm. "Your daughter attempted an abortion," the doctor said. "She's lost a lot of blood and is in critical condition." Mama Kemi's knees buckled. She gripped the edge of the chair, trying to steady herself. "How could this happen?" she whispered. Her eyes darted to Uncle John, who stood in the corner, unable to meet her gaze. Hours later, Kemi stirred, her weak voice barely audible. "Mama," she said, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you, but I was scared." Mama Kemi's heart broke as she listened to her daughter's halting confession. Kemi told her everything about Uncle John, the fear, the pregnancy, and the abortion. Mama Kemi's emotions surged from anger to sorrow to guilt. She realized that her strictness and emotional distance had left Kemi feeling alone and unsupported. Kemi's condition worsened, and she slipped into a coma. The doctors couldn't say when or if she would wake up. Mama Kemi sat by her daughter's bedside, holding her hand and whispering prayers. She vowed to protect Kemi, no matter what. Uncle John's guilt became unbearable. He confessed everything to Mama Kemi, begging for forgiveness. But she couldn't bring herself to look at him. "You were supposed to protect her," she said, her voice cold and trembling. "Instead, she couldn't finish the sentence." In the days that followed, Mama Kemi took action. She reported Uncle John to the authorities and sought counseling for herself. She realized that she needed to be both a mother and a friend to her daughter. Though Kemi remained in a coma, Mama Kemi stayed by her side, determined to be there when she woke up. She whispered promises to Kemi, vowing to create a home filled with love, understanding, and safety. The story of Kemi and Mama Kemi spread through the community, serving as a powerful lesson about trust, communication, and the importance of creating a safe space for children. Mama Kemi's journey was far from over, but she held on to hope, believing that one day, Kemi would wake up and they could start anew. Moral of the story: strict parenting without open communication can push children into danger. Mama Kemi thought she was protecting her daughter by controlling her, but when Kemi faced trouble, fear kept her from speaking up. John, who was supposed to protect her, had his own struggles, leading to bad decisions that changed Kemi's life. Parents should guide with love, not just control, so children feel safe to share their struggles. Share your opinion on what Mama Kemi could have done better.